Studies on positive psychology shows that negative events can also result in positive feelings such as learning and improving self-confidence and resilience. So today I want to talk to you about an important issue that people do not like to address. And something that I lived recently and that every day someone is facing. The grief, the broken heart, the pain of loss, yes, all together. This dark and painful subject that is avoided in all social gatherings. People avoid talking so much about pain, especially related to death, that when someone commits suicide, for example, most had no idea of this possibility. Society does not give space to talk about sadness, depression, or about painful subjects. And when something like that happens, that someone takes their own life, it's a shock. And people say, someone who was always smiling, so happy, how can this happen? Of course, people are always smiling. When we ask a friend, how are you? We are not really willing to stop and listen to what this person has to say. Stop and listen about the suffering that a person is going through? No, we really don't want to do that. People who experience pain do not want to feel a burden either, to be known as the negative person. So they close themselves, replying, "It's alright, I'm okay," even when they aren't. As a counselor, I have always been more prepared regarding this in my personal life, but I confess that the subject is not easy. It begins with the fact that if someone is in process of grieving, it's because something that we fear very much it had happened to this person. Could be a death of a loved one, a divorce, being fired, a diagnosis of a disease like cancer, for example. All this is scary, and we live as if we do not talk about the thing that will disappear or will not reach us. Unfortunately, the truth is the thing does not happen like that. Actually, the less we talk about the pain, the bigger it becomes. If forbidden or placed under the rug, much painful it will become. Much painful or traumatic event may become. If you throw the dirt, the fear, the sadness, or pain under the rug, the pile of dust will grow, and be visible, right? In sadness, unfortunately, it may not be so visible. And when we discover it, it's already compromised much of our mental health. Anyone who knows me knows that recently, for me still very recently, I lost my mother for breast cancer. She was only 64 years old. My mother, who was always very active, full of friends, an extremely caring and dear soul to everyone around her, suffered so much for this disease and died so early. And I was the only daughter. I consider her my best friend. Much more than that, I consider it impossible to live without my mother. And I thought this would be the biggest battle I would face in my life, and I was not wrong. My grieving process began with the news of the metastasis, the cancer metastasis, years before her death. Yes, grieving is a process with stages, phases that can come in order, in a sequence, but most of the time, though, these stages they come shuffled during the process, and it can also happen not in the event of death only, but we can mourn or grieving for any kind of loss. And grieving has the stage of denial is the first one. In that case, is in the case of death, it's symbolical denial when we feel in shock and almost numbed by the pain of the loss. When we receive such bad news and say it must be a lie, it's not true. I might have dreamed about it. There is the anger phase stage that can appear in several ways. Anger of the relative that died for not having taken better care. Anger of the doctors who could have done something better to save. Or anger only because something so bad could happen to someone so good. You can feel angry at being abandoned. This is more common in children and in spouses. Sometimes we do not even relate a bad mood to a death, as sometimes we are angry because we have to continue live in a world where this person so loved is not there anymore. Third is the negotiation, the bargain stage. We can try to negotiate with God, for example. It can happen before death itself when a child says, I promise to be better if my mother is cured, for example. Guilt is usually comes together in this stage of bargain because our head gets full of if I did it. And you can shift from bargaining to the healing of your loved ones, or even for the exchange of being you in his or her place. That is the stage of depression. It usually comes after the stage of the bargain. Usually is when we come back to the present, empty, without the presence of whom we loved so much. Is if we wanted to get out of life too. Days come and go and we do not seem to care. And finally, there is the stage of acceptance. That is often confused with the notion of being okay with everything that happened. But the truth is most people will never feel okay with the death of a loved one. This stage is about accepting the fact that the fact happened. If with time, this stage can lead to healing of this wound. Those are the 5 stages of grieving according to psychologist Elizabeth Ross. Of course, a counselor, a psychologist, does not have to experience trauma or pain to understand and help a client, regardless of the situation he's living. But when we experience set events in life, our capacity of understanding and empathy can be greatly increased, especially if we are mature enough to seek all the aids we offer to our own clients. So I started my search to work in my grief very early. I read books about it, I talked about my fears and pain, I never denied my problem, and I looked for a professional friend to help me. Yes, professionals of mental health also looks for help to keep us psychologically healthy. I tried to prepare myself for the worst moment, her death, to live without my mother. And as I went through all this stage of grieving, in the process of her illness, before the death itself, I considered that the mourning, the grief of the death, would be mild to me. How naive. Not even taking care of me, it was inevitable to fall in all stages again, and the depression was the strongest of all for sure. I am sure if I ask friends or family members if my grieving was complicated or hard, I am sure they will be surprised about my statement today. Yes, I was very depressed. To increase the impact of this pain, I had to live my grief in a new place, in another country, without many friends around me. The absence of social support made it very difficult. I had no one to share my pain with, and like someone in depressive mood does, we protect the closest one from our sadness. So I protected my husband and my kids, avoid to show them what I was really feeling. And in this case, we smile and we show ourselves to them like everything is fine. For almost 2 years, my days were all about waking up because I had to and prepare everything so that children and husband could leave to school and work well. And when they left the apartment, I would lay down on the couch and the sofa all morning and just cry. Cried. I cried it, I ate. I did nothing productive this time. With theoretical awareness of the whole process that I was living, I confess that it was not so impossible to overcome, but definitely was more painful than I imagined. It hit me harder than I thought. After all, this was one of the most dreaded pains for me, right? Yes, and did I decide to talk about this today? I wanted to share with you this personal period of pain, this experience, so that you can understand that we are all struggling with our loss. We may think that your pain feels worse than the other, but your friend, your relative on your side, by your side, may be thinking the same thing. So grief is not only yours. Everyone in the world may be experiencing grieving process. When a family finds itself facing a large loss, a conflict that can be generated when the family does not work the grief, it's when one or more family members beginning to compare the pain between them. This not only generates more pain, but can be devastating for the relation in this family. So I recommend that if you have a relative who, in the loss of a father, a mother, or worse, of a child, is stopped in one of those stages like anger, this family has to join and talk about it, the subject. The biggest mistake made is to deny, is to put under the rug any conflict generated by the event that brought grieving. There are families that does not even want to talk about it, the subject, or even say the name of that person who died. There are families who hide photos of the dead. All this may end up making the wound healing process even more difficult. Grieving is a wound exposed open. It can start to heal, create the scab. The scab was figuratively the stage of acceptance of the event, but there will be always something to hurt this wound again. That you can go back to the open wound, anger, not acceptance, bargain, depression, all the most difficult phase of the grieving. May be mistreating this wound that, if not treated, can be kept open forever. And when, with the help of family, psychotherapy, self-care, we achieved acceptance of your pain, when we accept that thing can no longer be changed, the scar will continue there, in the same place, always reminding you of the event, and then you will be able to overcome. It can be the person's name, it can be the place that you live, it can be object, even a real scar related to the event. But when you are able to look to that scar, recognize that you felt and live that pain, but that this pain is in the past, then you have won the loss. So my recommendation to you if you are going through a pain of loss, through a grieving, the first step is to recognize your wound. Make a reality check. Take my example. Even considering me a prepared person, like I thought I was, I failed. Allow yourself to stop and to check your feelings and behaviors. In case of divorce, it is common for us to wear a negative image since we suffer abandonment. In the event of death of a family member, the biggest attention should go to the children involved in the process, but no adult should forget to take care of their mental health too at that time. It's the same about when oxygen mask of airplanes come down. They say put first on you and then you can help who is by your side. So the children who lost a relative has few resource to understand and experience these moments. They may feel extremely guilt for this death or for the separation of the parents. So be aware of this so that you can help this child to go through this grief in a healthy way. Even if it's painful, do not try to erase or deny the situation and look for a professional prepared to work with grieving in children. In families who hide the facts, who do not speak of the dead, there is the feeling that nothing's happening when everyone is suffering the same unspoken pain. It's necessary to give each one the necessary time for recovery. Every grieving has its own different time. As a parent who respects your children, avoiding putting another mother or father in their place. It's necessary to understand that if you have a new partner, it can be good for you, not for your recovery, but maybe it's very painful for the children. You must be careful about how to insert this new variable in the children's grieving. It's good to make it clear that in case of grieving in separation, abandonment can take a bigger burden in this process. In this case, the family is not dealing not only with the loss of a loved one, but with the loss of the love of a father or a mother who left the family, generating the feeling of abandonment in the child, the loss of the love of that person. This may make you feel more guilt and less loved because the abandonment was an option, when often in death there is no such an option. One is not to blame for having died, right? So be aware of your feelings and recognize when something is wrong with you. I just realized that I was not winning my grieving when someone warned me how much I had put weight and how I was not producing much in my life. Do not close yourself to the world. If you close yourself, if you avoid people, it will be harder to overcome the pain. Speak, go to the psychotherapist, speak for people who loved you, even for just colleagues. Share your loss, your sadness, until one day you will notice how you speak of that person or situation will not bring so many tears in their eyes. Be aware that in the absence of this person, new rules will be distributed in the family. These rules cannot become a burden to anyone. Perhaps there is the son that looks more like the father, and then the family makes him the provider, forcing this boy to grow and putting a big load on his shoulders. Or a more maternal daughter. You'll be in position to take care of the brothers and sisters and sometimes leave their lives aside. Or even in the positive context, if you can demonstrate the love that this dead person, this family member, showed to the people of the family, do not be tempted to continue spreading this love, because every form of love heals. If you have lost someone to a cancer-like illness that will killing slowly, do not feel guilty for the moment of relief felt when death comes. This is a common guilty. You are relieved because the pain of that person has stopped, come to an end. And all the work of dealing with the person ends too. It's not a sin to feel this relief. Actually, it's a natural reaction of the human body when it gets rid of any stress situation, and has nothing to do with the size of your love for this person who had died. Tears. Do not be ashamed to let it roll down. Pull all the tears out of you. Do not drown on because you can drown later. Do not also drown in regrets. Remind yourself that focus on what you regret or not doing increase your suffering and the grieving process too. We are accustomed to putting our brains to work on the things that we repent and forgetting the countless that we did very well. The story. Pay attention how the loss, the event, will be told, because that will take shape in your head and in your heart. If you tell the story of the death of a person, of a traumatic event, in a way that bring up always the good moments, the victories, the lessons brought by the event, you will build a story of victory, overcoming, love, learning. That will help positively in your pain. But if you choose to always tell the story in the most dramatic episode possible, highlighting the mistakes of others, the sadness event, always talking about your regrets, you will build a story that will destroy any possibility of healing of that bleeding wound. Whenever I talk about my mother's death, what I first bring is the benefit of even living abroad, have been with her until her last breath. How we experienced so many good things when we were in the hospital, of how I received such great support for everyone around me that it still makes me want to cry, think about these people. How strong she was against cancer, and all that I learned from her in this death process. Not to fear. My mother did not fear death and showed me that what a really strong person she was. My mother taught me that when something horrible, terrible like a cancer touches you, you should not tell why with me, but you should say why not me. That way we can understand that we are not special, that death and pain reaches everyone, and we can stop to live in an illusory world of Superman and unshakable Superwoman, when in reality we are nothing but fragile beings that will become dust again. With this awareness of our finitude, we can live a life more in the present, with more love and less pain. Even if our body is full of this kind of scars, it will never be open wounds again. So start today to avoid thinking or talking about any pain. I wish you all healing from any pain you are feeling today. And may you never stop asking for help before depression takes you on a more painful path. See? Talking about what causes pain can be positive as well. it can lead to closing a lot of unresolved wounds and leave us more prepared. Even that pain is individual, we can be aware that pains exist and know how to deal with those pains, bringing better results than avoid those kind of issues.